That works. Somebody took my gavel, which was a big bolt, because I didn't have a gavel, so it worked. So we'll get started with this. Please remember to put your cell phones on vibrate. Everyone's welcome here. We're pretty easy to get along with, I think, usually, unless Tim makes us mad. So, yeah, and for a committee, you get to see some people you don't often see in our committee, due to handling a number of different bills, but you also get the experience of seeing a number of different bills that come through the legislature. And with that, we'll get started. Mark, would you call the roll, please?
Representative Banks,
Here.
Representative Conrad,
Here.
Representative Heiner,
Here.
Representative, Knapp,
Here.
Representative Larson,
Here.
Representative Lawley,
Here.
Representative Tarver,
Here.
Representative Western, Chairman Burkhart.
Here. We have a quorum. Okay, first bill for us to consider today is House Bill 67, Special License Plate Decals, Women's Veterans. And to present his bill, because this is an individual bill, we have finally a representative actually presenting their own bill. We have Representative Stiver. So Representative, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning committee. This House Bill 67, special license plates decal for women veterans. This will, we're just adding a provision to the statute 31-2-217. And it's just for a decal for women veterans. It's optional. 17, when I had the bill drafted, there was 12 states that have actual license plates. It's up to 17 now. Colorado happened to be one of them that just enacted this. It's optional. The reason I went with the decal, talking with other people, other service members, they figured a decal would be better than a license plate. If we get enough in the 5 years of monitoring how many decals, then go for a license plates, instead of wasting the money to dump it into a plate that nobody's going to want. It'll go with on all specialty license plates, DVA plates, and all the veteran plates, if the female veteran wants it. It's also going with the National Veterans Memorial for Women on the Mall in Washington, D.C. They're really pushing this. So there will be a $5 fee for the sticker, plus the administration fees that'll be figured out once this is approved. It's a simple bill.
Representative, yeah, it's 7 or 8 pages. Why don't you walk us through it and explain why what I considered to be a fairly simple bill is, what do we have, 6 pages long? I'm just curious. I know how bills go sometimes, but it seemed like it was a long bill for really a small change. So please, if you would walk us through it.
On page 1, okay, it's adding to, because they had to add it in different sections, 1 through D. It's 31-217 special plates, Pearl Harbor survivors, National Guard members, and Armed Forces veterans, Purple Heart recipients, women. And that's where they added the women and forces veterans decals. On page 2, line 8, they added, and if applied for, eligible, one set of decals designated for the person is an honorably discharged woman veteran of the United States Armed Forces in accordance with the section. And then they struck out some stuff. The license plate shall be displayed on the vehicle. That's in the statute now. A decal designated, they added a decal designated for a person is an honorably discharged woman veteran shall be attached to the lower left corner of the license plate issued under this section. Then it goes into the application, how they get it. The county clerks will have the application forms. Any person eligible under the subsection for a special license plate provided in this section will apply for additional license plates or decals upon payment of the fees required in this act. Then page 4, there's some changes. As provided for this section shall be the other type of plate license provided for this subject is different. Oh, I can't pronounce that. Differentiated and designated whether the person is a survivor of Pearl Harbor, veteran of the United States and Armed Forces. A specialized plate shall allow for a decal designating an honorably discharged woman veteran to be attached to the lower left corner of this license plate without obstructing any other symbols, letters, or numbers on the license plate. Wyoming resident, an honorably discharged woman veteran of the United States Armed Forces decal to be attached, again, lower left corner, by presenting documents that she is a female and an honorably discharged woman veteran of the United States Armed Forces. The decal designated a woman veteran of the United States Armed Forces shall bear a distinguishing symbol or letter identifying the resident of the honorably discharged woman veteran of the Armed Forces. Each applicant for the decal under the subsection shall be submitted to an administration fee. With the application, the fee shall be in the amount determined by the department to be significant to cover reasonable administration costs of the decal, but not more than $5 per set of decals for any one vehicle. On completion of the application, recipient of the administration fee, determination of eligibility and insurance or renewal of the special license plate. Under subsection, the county treasurer shall issue to the applicant the number of decals corresponding to the number of license plates issued or renewed under the subsection to be attached. Any questions?
Representative Conrad.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Stiver, thank you for the introduction. Just a quick question for clarification. You mentioned 5 years to determine the value or how many. I was just curious, what are you looking for to move forward with that?
Representative?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad, instead of going out and just doing a license plate real quick, because that costs money, and if there's no, you get 20 women veteran that want this on their license plates. We don't want to run a whole series of license plates and waste money. So if, we keep track of how many decals are given out, and if that's a sufficient number, then come back in 5 years when we renew the license plates again and apply for them to have their own specialized license plate. I was, the other day I was out here in town, and they've got stickers right now coming from the National Mall that's got it's an emblem of a female veteran, and she has it on the side of her car that, I'm a female veteran. Both her and her husband are veterans. But, that on her car, she's got that sticker from the National Mall designating her as a female veteran, a woman veteran.
Mr. Chairman, just a
Follow
clarifying
up?
question.
Go ahead.
Please. I was just numerically, is it 1,000? I mean, is there a certain value you guys are looking for towards getting that
Representative?
permanent?
I believe that's going to be up to the department
Okay.
that issues the license plates is what's that threshold where it's going to be feasible to do that.
Okay.
But this gives them the opportunity to go out there because there's special license plates now in the state that we haven't even sold any. But they're still, by statute, they still have to make these license plates, even though we haven't sold any.
Thank
So, I'm thinking, let's use some common sense. If there's enough, the department comes to us in, 4 years and says, yeah, we've got, X amount of these decals sold, let's go for a license plate. Then our body needs to do that.
Thank
If
you.
not, because we still have, the Desert Storm decals out there on some vehicles, Vietnam vet, Korean.
Makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So,
Thank you.
Committee, just to add a little bit to what Representative Stiver said. In the past, we've done specialty license plates. The problem is literally we've done those, and in the future, after we pass legislation, have actually sold, as Representative Stiver said, none. The department has actually had to scrap and send for reprocessing pallets of license plates, specialty plates, because they weren't sold. So I think Representative Stiver has taken a route to say, let's see what the demand is before we start printing thousands of license plates that we might not be able to sell, because we have to at least break even on the plates and that, and hopefully a decal will improve the looks of the upcoming new license plate. That's another issue. If you want to argue that, take that one to the commission. They're the ones who approved it 5 years ago. So any other questions for Representative Stiver? Go ahead, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Stiver, thank you for being here. Is there any limit to the sets of decals that a woman veteran can request? Can she request more than just for one vehicle? Can she request up to 10 vehicles of?
Representative Stiver?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner. In there on page 6, where is it? Upon completion of the application recipient of the administration fee determination, the eligibility of renewal or specialized plates, the county treasurer shall issue to that the number of decals corresponding to the number of license plates issued or renewed. So if they've got, 2 vehicles and they got, Army plates on 2 vehicles, or whatever DV plate or whatever, especially military service they are, they'll be able to get them decals for them plates. With, the administration fee, but then they'll have to pay, $5 for each set of decals.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a follow-up, Representative Stiver, is your spouse a veteran woman, a woman veteran?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, yes. She is a combat veteran.
Other questions for Representative Stiver? Okay, I do have one, Representative. I guess when I see a veteran license plate, I assume they're a veteran, honorably discharged, served their country. I guess I don't think of it as either a male or a female veteran. So we're designating one for the women. I have no problem with that. I guess my question would be, should we also designate one for the men? And then a follow-up would be, if they have the specialty plates and say the woman was in the Navy and the man was in the Army, how do you resolve that issue? That's it. Never mind. You don't have to answer that question. But the first one, please.
We're all veterans, but within, how do I want to put this? Politically correct. Think about this for a second, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot of people out there, like when me and my wife are out somewhere, they'll thank me for my service or talk about my service. They don't know she's a veteran. That's why this is optional. If it's the female veteran, woman veteran wants to display this, say, hey, I'm a veteran too, because a lot of people in society think it's just men in the service. But there's a lot of females out there that were in the service, and it's just something to recognize them, and going along with the National Women's Memorial there in the mall that they're building.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. So I guess we have YDOT here. We also have the Veterans Commission. So let me ask YDOT to come up first, if you would. And just hang with us, Representative. We may have you back up here. Don't go too far back there. So if you would introduce yourself for the record, please. Is it your microphone on? And if it is, you might need to get a little closer, please.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me now?
A little closer.
All right.
There. Thank you.
I am Debbie Lopez with the Wyoming Department of Transportation. And I am here to say that YDOT can administer this bill. We will work with the Veterans Commission to design the decal, and we will work with the county treasurers to get the decal distributed to the customers who order them.
Right. Questions for Ms. Lopez? Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fiscal note says that there's no fiscal changes due to this. Do you foresee any additional costs for YDOT to administer this program in any way?
Ms. Lopez?
Mr. Chairman, it'll be minimal because we already have the stickers, because we use them on the license plates already. We have the printer that prints them, and just adding another application.
Okay. Representative Conrad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarification, is the effective date of July 1st? Can you execute from the YDOT to distribute those, I guess, stickers by that point?
Ms. Lopez?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I believe we can.
Any other questions? Okay, Ms. Lopez, do you have any sort of concept of what the decal might look like at this point? I know you have artists who design these things, so that was just a question, curiosity.
Mr. Chairman, no, we haven't worked any kind of design out at all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Just hang with us. Veterans Commission.
Morning, Mr. Chairman,
Tim?
committee. I'm Tim Shepard. I'm the Executive Director for the Wyoming Veterans Commission. I speak in favor of this bill. However, I will have a slight caveat to that. I have talked to some women who kind of, where you went, Chairman, say, hey, I am a soldier. I don't need to be further designated as a woman. I don't care to be further designated as a woman. I want to be known as a soldier. A sailor, Marine, airman, now Guardian. So anyway, I will, my own experience, I did have one veteran contact me to say that, and she actually was pretty adamant about it. And from my own experience, I go back to when I was a company commander, and when we would go to the field, it seemed like things would go well, except the relationship between the men and the women. When we would get back, it would seem like we were a tighter team when we came back, except for that relationship. And so I finally decided, I'm going to survey the women and try to figure out what's going on. And what they came back with was that we had a policy of the women had their own tents. And regardless of what platoon they were in, they would lodge in this one tent. Well, they didn't like that because it separated them from the rest of their platoon. And they felt like over the course of time, it just kind of took them away from, because a lot of your life in the field is around that tent or your home. And so we decided, with their blessing, that we would change that policy and allow the women to billet in the same tent as the men and let them figure out, how to make sure that that was an okay environment for everyone involved. And they did it, and it worked great. So that's just one. But what I really go back to is my experience when I went to basic training. And I actually served in a company at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, that was the first integrated company for basic training. And so we had a platoon of women. And what I'll always remember is how proud they were when they graduated, that they did everything that every man in that outfit did. And they did it as well, and they had earned the title soldier. And there was no caveat. You didn't go to a special base. You didn't get a lighter weapon. You did everything we did, or that the men did. And so they felt that honor. So I believe there's going to be a population of women who say, thanks, but no. But now on the other hand, and why I support this is I do believe there are women out there who want that recognition and will appreciate that recognition. And I think that this is a great way to lead into the potential for a license plate down the road. But again, I heard you loud and clear on the, hey, we've made plates that haven't made any difference. No one bought them. So let's find out. Let's do a decal. I think between YDOT and the Veterans Commission, it'll be relatively simple to administer this program and to get those stickers out there. So again, I stand in support of this bill.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Shepherd? Excuse me. Any questions? So Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Shepherd, to your comments about some different views of women on this, I appreciated them, first of all. And what I think I heard you say is that there might be partly a generational issue there in terms of where women found themselves in the process of assimilating women into the military versus those that maybe that pathway's already been blazed and the differences there. Is that, am I correct in that?
Director Shepherd.
Mr. Chairman, through you to the representative, I think that's 100% correct. We do have several generations of women in the military going back to the days where it was very segregated. And that did work to a degree, but as we evolve and move forward, we just find that, you know, we can let go of some of those things.
Other questions for the director? Other questions? Okay. So Director, I'm going to take a personal privilege here, not just like a 30-second answer. Dear to my heart is the Veterans Skilled Nursing Facility. Do you have any idea where we stand on staffing that and getting residents in there?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that bit by bit, they are identifying the staff for that. The construction still continues on Cottage One. It's close. I think that by the time they've completed all of the testing that they have to do with a certain number of residents and, you know, whether they meet it, and then to have it open to all 36, I think we're looking at March.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So committee, and again, this is just a personal privilege. We have Director Shepherd here. If you get a chance and you're in Buffalo, stop and take a look at that facility up there. Have you seen it, Representative Western? Have you been in there? That's kind of your area up there.
Chairman Burkhart, I have, and it's very impressive.
Yes. So we were the last state to put a skilled nursing facility in. It's state of the art. And for all of our veterans and their spouses, wonderful, wonderful facility. And we're looking at making some other changes up there and remodeling the veterans home. So Director, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's see, who else do we have? Representative Rachel Rodriguez Williams, anything to say on this one? Okay. Anyone from the governor's office? All right. Any other agencies? Okay, with that, public comment. Please, come on up.
Good morning. I'm Gail Simmons, United States Navy, retired, and I will attest to the generational differences. So I want to give you just a little bit of background because I think it's really critical to understand where differing generations come from. In July 30th, 1942, the WAVES was created. It's an acronym for Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Services, part of World War II. It was WAC and then they became a WAF. In 1948, the Women's Armed Services Integration Act was passed, and the WAVES became a permanent component of the U.S. Navy, a separate but permanent component. In 1978, separate units in armed forces integrated with formerly all male, which is what the director was referencing to. In 1978, I think it was, the first women midshipmen arrived at the U.S. Naval Academy in Maryland. In 1979, women officers became permanently assigned to 20 designated non-combatant ships. 4 of those had enlisted women as well. In 1980, so 2 years after the integration, I entered Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island. I commissioned and took the oath that all officers take. I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. The exact same oath that everyone takes. In 1981, the first class with women graduated from the Naval Academy. They went through hell, for, excuse my language, but literal hell for 4 years to be naval officers, not to be women naval officers. That same group, a part of those, joined me at the Navy Supply Corps School to become designated as Naval Supply Corps officers. Along with 3 of those academy grads, I was one of the few women who were assigned to shipboard duty upon completion, and we had to insist that they double the number of billets available shipboard. I remember telling the detailer that if I wanted shore duty, I'd have joined the Air Force. I was a sailor. So I went to the USS Yosemite AD-19. I was the 4th woman officer to be assigned to that ship. By 1983, before I left that duty, there were 8 women officers and nearly 100 enlisted. And if you don't think integrating women into a crew of 800 men is fun, let me tell you otherwise. But it was critical. I actually returned to shipboard duty almost 12 years later to USS Jason AR-8. And I happened to be the senior woman at that time, woman officer. On that ship, almost none of the men had served on my first ship, on the Yosemite. Almost none of the men had ever served with women before. On my second ship, 10 years later, almost none of the men had not served with women. That was the change that occurred. So in my entire service, I was the first, the only, or one of the few women at every duty station. And the same was true with all of the women that I came through with. That included the Seabees in the Pacific. We build, we fight. And in the submarine directorate of the Naval Sea Systems Command. In each of those assignments, the accountability and responsibility I held was exactly the same as the men who served in that same position either before me or after me. Too many have successfully knocked down barriers, overcome resistance, and persevered in attaining equal status for women to serve their country with honor and earn the title of veteran for the state of Wyoming to codify, even on something so simple, to have women be a subset, even having that be an option. The proposal is for a decal small enough to fit on a license plate. Small enough to fit on a license plate. Any veteran who feels a need to distinguish the circumstance of their service, whether it is a woman, Native American, homosexual, aviator, artillery, or any other subgroup or specialty, should do so in a way that's clearly visible. I would recommend a bumper sticker. And in fact, I would honor those who would do that because that's an individual basis. Finally, HB 39, adding the veteran designation to the Wyoming driver's license, passed on 3rd reading and is waiting to be picked up in the Senate. This is a much more effective and appropriate format to have official recognition as status as an individual without creating a subset. Ironically, it is the success of our having earned equal status that those who followed us 20 or more years later feel the need to distinguish their service separately from men. And finally, I have a question. Has anybody asked the Veterans Administration how many women veterans reside in Wyoming? So I appreciate that this is an option, and I understand. I just do not believe that codifying this, even for something that's optional as a sticker, does honor to those who blazed the trail as Representative Lawley identified. And I stand for questions.
Okay. Questions for Ms. Simmons? Questions? Ms. Simmons, thank you very much for your testimony. Okay. Next. Please, come on down. Please. Please, if you would identify yourself for the record, and if you represent someone or just yourself, and remember to address the chair. And we know, I don't recognize you having testified before this committee before, so we're easy to get along with.
I appreciate that, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am Mara McManaman, fourth generation Wyomingite from Goshen County in Torrington, Wyoming. I am a 100% disabled Army veteran, a female soldier. Per Colonel Shepard's testimony, I too completed basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I believe HB 0067 is an outstanding way of honoring our female veterans. I look forward to recognizing other women's service to our country as well as my own. I support this bill 100%. I can also appreciate the fact that this is optional. I know that my sister, who works for Federal Marshals, was prior service Army, and she would like to avoid this for profiling reasons. But I believe that for me, myself, I would be honored to support this. When I go out with my civilian boyfriend, who do you think the public tries to recognize for their service? Army pride, huh? Thank you. I'm available for questions.
Any questions? Any questions? Ms. McMahon, thank you very much for your
Thank you, Mr.
testimony. Thank you
Chairman.
for being here.
Absolutely.
And did you travel down today in the weather, or were you already here?
I was already here, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else want to speak to House Bill 67? Okay, with that, I will close public testimony. Committee? Moved by Conrad? Seconded by Larson. Okay, discussion. Representative Lawley.
Mr. Chairman, I do see this as there is a generational issue here, and as a woman who was privileged to be in my own area of the law, to be in a place of somewhat of a trailblazer, I do understand the distinctions. We fought hard to remove barriers, to be seen as equal and not distinguished as a woman. But I also very much respect those who have come. We blazed the trail in each of our areas for you. And if this decal will help them feel acknowledged, I just say I have no problem with that. I think, but there is a distinction, and I appreciated the testimony about that distinction. It's real, but because this is optional, not much money, I would support.
Okay, any other discussion on the bill? Any other discussion? Okay. Question being called. Mark, would you please take the roll? This is a roll call vote on due pass on House Bill 67, Special License Plate Decals, Women Veterans.
Representative Banks,
Aye.
Representative Conrad,
Aye.
Representative Heiner,
Aye.
Representative Knapp,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Tarver, Representative Western. No? Chairman Burkhart.
Aye. So Representative Stiver, it's your bill to carry on the floor.
Thank you, Chairman.
Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 43, Winter Road Closures. So we have the department with us in a different uniform this morning. So members of the committee, like I said, these three bills give you a chance to see a variety of things you probably wouldn't see otherwise. I think it's good experience, especially for the new members. And that. So with that, name, rank, and for the record, you don't have to give us your serial number.
Mr. Chairman, Committee, Josh Walter, Lieutenant Colonel for the Wyoming Highway Patrol. I'll I realize this has been in transportation a few times and is now over here, so I'll just take a little bit of time to walk through some slides that we presented before and sort of give the backstory to the bill and some changes in it. We stand behind this and stand behind some sort of change in it. I get there's some concern over the wording in it, so I think that's what we'll discuss today primarily. But we have an issue in the Wyoming Highway Patrol and in law enforcement in general with people running road closed gates. Today is a perfect example of road closed gates. We swing a gate, put lights on a sign, open a sign, whatever it is, and indicate that a road's closed and people drive by them. So the changes here today, and really this statute in general, isn't about revenue. It's not about generating funds. It's not about writing tickets. It's about having some sort of teeth for people to understand that there are consequences. Because right now, quite frankly, in several areas around the state, people get and understand some of the statements in here and what's required that, this really isn't a big deal. If I get stopped, here's what I'll say in court and it'll be dropped. That's a sentiment traveling around the state. So we'd just like to discuss a couple of changes that maybe could help curb that and potentially give some sort of teeth and some sort of, consequences to folks who do run the road closed gate. Just to put things in context, we typically write maybe a couple hundred of these a year in contrast with, 25 to 30,000 speeding citations. So again, just to confirm the fact this is not about generating revenue, which, as you guys know, doesn't come to the Highway Patrol anyway.
Colonel, I'm going to interrupt you right there just for a moment so that the committee understands, especially the new members. Any fine levied in the state of Wyoming goes to the school district in which the fine was written. So your speeding tickets go to that local school district. An OSHA violation goes to the local school district. It does not go to the agency that writes it or anything else, and that's constitutional, actually. So thank you. I just wanted to explain that to the committee. Colonel, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Drivers continue to ignore the road closure signs. This leads to crashes, longer closures, safety concerns due to weather and unsafe road conditions. It's even led to some pursuits. Really, it's about, of course, law enforcement safety, but more importantly, the safety of the public we serve. Some jurisdictions, more than others, seem to interpret the way the statute is written now with the words willfully fails to observe in different ways. And I think in the past, as I dug into this more, Mr. Chairman, committee, I think in the past we've been hung up on the word willfully. But I think really what jurisdictions are hung up on is they fail to observe. We're really writing someone a citation or saying they're in violation because they failed to observe, which I don't think is the intent of the statute. If you fail to observe, that's okay, you fail, but what is the reason? You're supposed to be a prudent, observant driver. So the ticket isn't for, the citation isn't for, the violation isn't for failing to observe, it's for going past the sign, disobeying it. You read the sign and you drove past it. So just give you guys a quick example on eastbound on 22, which is coming into Wyoming up on Teton Pass. We have a VMS sign, so a variable message sign, which we can put bright yellow letters on to say that the road is closed. We have 5 or 6 signs, I believe, on that stretch of roadway coming into the state. It can be remotely closed from TMC. There's one sign that says Wyoming 22. Above it is 2 big flashing yellow lights, and below it says closed. The signs are typically 6 feet or 8 feet wide, 6 feet, 6 inches tall. It's basically at least a 4x8 sheet of plywood is how big these things are. They're difficult to miss. And again, people are driving past them. Really what their intent is, I don't know, but to say you missed them is pretty rough. But again, folks are standing in court and saying, well, it wasn't willful. I didn't willfully fail to observe the sign, and so it gets dropped. So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, again, I think the hangup a lot of times that we've discussed this is willfully, and I'd just like to, if I could, maybe propose some different wording. But if you'd like me to, Mr. Chairman, I could work through the bill as well and some of the changes that you guys have proposed. in there.
Colonel, if you would work through the bill first and then give us the suggested wording. I wish that Representative Stiver had not left. He also had some suggested wording that I thought might work. And one of the reasons we have this bill to us today is we don't have a heavy workload, but transportation does. It's a transportation committee bill, and I had chaired transportation in the last term, so I'm familiar with the bill and I can add to whatever the Colonel has to say. But Colonel, please continue.
Absolutely. So on page 2 of the bill, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, page 1 of the bill, line 14, is really getting into the nuts and bolts of this. So subsection A, any person who willfully fails to observe any sign, marker, warning, notice, or direction placed or given under Wyoming statute is guilty of a misdemeanor. And this is where it's been proposed in the past that willfully is struck. And so I'll just say, in speaking with Representative Stiver, he suggested the wording instead of any person, any ordinary observant person who willfully fails to observe. And again, based on the comments that I made earlier, I don't think that addresses it. Again, I'm not so hung up on willfully anymore after talking with some of the jurisdictions. I think it's the failure to observe. So I'll work through the bill, Mr. Chairman, then I'll come back and maybe give some other recommendations there.
Please.
Page 2, line 3. I think this is just an addition, Mr. Chairman and committee, just to put the cap on the dollar amount that could be charged for this violation, which, by the way, on the bond schedule is currently $570.
Colonel, at that, I think this could be a stumbling block on the bill, and I hate running a bill that, again, we're not looking at the money, we're looking at the safety factors and the ability to control this. How would you feel if we removed that cap of 1,500 and just let it revert back to what it was?
Mr. Chairman, committee, I don't have any issues with that.
All right, thank you. Proceed.
This did on line 3, though, it did also change it from more to less. So not more than is what it used to read, $750, and the proposal was not less than $750. So it was a proposal to increase the fine, again, to give it more teeth. I don't think you'll find any law enforcement personnel out there who would get too hung up over 750 as opposed to 570. It's just, will it stand or won't it? If it gets dropped, it doesn't matter if it's 1,500, it's not valid. So I'm moving on down to line 7 through 13. So to me, this appears to be several lines written to really explain the word willfully, or really maybe instead of removing the word willfully, give this some teeth. And I quite frankly don't know that it's needed. And I'll talk about the couple of proposals I have here in a minute. But proof of the existence of the sign, marker, warning, notice, or direction placed or given. So we have to provide proof that there's a sign there located before and in the same direction of travel as the location where the person was cited. So they're pulled over and written a citation. We have to show that there was a sign in the same direction they were going in the same area that they were traveling. Cited for a violation of this section shall constitute prima facie evidence of a violation of this subsection. So we show there's a sign there, and that's proof that they passed it and they were in violation. And that, in summary, are the changes that have been proposed in this bill.
So Colonel, you said you had some additional ideas on it, and I'm gonna just ask you to wait a minute. So committee, this bill has been up, I think it's 3 times. Last session, Representative Heiner, Representative Western, Representative Knapp, remember, the word willfully was an hour-long discussion on the floor that resulted in no solution. As I've said, an hour of my time I'll never get back. If we'd have come up with a solution, that's one thing, but we didn't. So that's one issue with this. The patrol, the sheriffs have all asked for something like this to put some more teeth and more control in the road closures. When a road's closed and say a semi goes around it, wrecks on the interstate, has a crash, blocks the interstate, that delays opening of the road. And all of us complain, especially those of us who live west of here, about Interstate 80 being closed. And many times, that's the reason. Truck went around the road closure, crashed, and now we have a blocked interstate. And they can't get it cleared because of that until they clear the wreck. So those are some of the issues with this. The Colonel mentioned Highway 22 up in the Jackson area. That's the most heavily traveled 2-lane road in the state. It literally is in the summer bumper to bumper traffic. In the winter, you come off the mountain, it is a dangerous road. I think we do need to address this issue, and I'm not so much concerned about fines and that as I am the safety aspect and helping address it. The patrol, so that everyone understands, is down. Are you still down? Last time I heard it was 43 troopers statewide.
Mr. Chairman, today is 51.
Okay, 51 troopers. And when they have to go to court on these, it takes them off the highways. And most of the time, from my understanding, is they lose in court. The courts just don't want to address the issue. Some courts won't even hear it. So that's the reason for this and some background on that. And so with that, Colonel, you have some suggested ideas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brings up a great point. A lot of folks, especially on 22 in the Jackson area, write a different citation, write a different statute, and that's disobedience to traffic control devices. And the reason they write that, it's significantly more inexpensive. It's $150 just to further show that's not about the fine amount. But because it doesn't have the requirement that willfully fails to observe in there, it just says you disobeyed it. Again, I'm going to really harp on that line 14 subsection A, because I don't want to write a person a ticket for failing to observe a sign. I want to write a person a ticket or pull them over and stop them because they disobeyed it, which is what that other statute 315402 addresses. So with that said, I would propose something to the effect of subsection A, any person who either disobeys or disregards, and then strike everything up to any sign, marker, warning, notice, or direction. That's where it would continue. Any person who disregards or disobeys, whichever terminology you think is best, any sign, marker, warning, notice, or direction placed, and then so on and so forth. Stealing language, one other suggestion might be, and it's the only two I have, might be to copy the language that's in the obedience to devices, traffic control devices, is just the driver of any vehicle shall obey, and then pick up on line 15, sign, marker, warning, notice, or direction.
All right, so any other questions for Colonel Walther? And Colonel Walther did a great job of filling in as colonel for the whole patrol during the interim when your boss left and you got a new one, who I haven't met yet, which I will. So, so we have those. Committee questions. Representative Lawley, one of the reasons you're on this committee. Please proceed.
I've often wondered why I'm on this committee. No, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Colonel, as I'm looking at this from a legal perspective, I have just a couple of thoughts. Obviously, that pulling out willful, and I certainly don't want to put that back on the table, but you're taking away intent. So, and then you're inferring intent by action, which sometimes statutes do that. But, and this is more addressing, and I think I heard you say you're happy to take this out, but the very latter portion about prima facie evidence. I'm thinking the way this is written, maybe there's something I've missed in it. I live in Worland, and if I want to cross over to Buffalo and I start out and I know the weather's going to probably change, but I want to try to get over there, and I get on the mountain and you close the road, and it technically that sign's behind me now, but it wasn't there when I went through. That seems a little ambiguous here, but yet you are saying in effect, the way written as a prima facie case, you have just decided that was my intent. And that's unworkable as a practical matter to me. So that would be my first comment.
Mr.
Colonel?
Chairman. Representative, this wasn't the WHP's language, so this is just my interpretation of it, and I agree wholeheartedly. And I've discussed this with Representative Stivar, and this is where our investigation comes into play. We pull someone over, and did they pass it? Or were they, out at a ranch for 5 hours and then roads closed in the meantime? So to me, I think the two proposals that I just made cover what we're talking about, and really, the prima facie evidence is not up to the statute to determine, it's up to the courts to determine. So I would agree with this.
Follow up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree, and I do like your proposals. The idea of disobeying and disregarding is a much more stable thing to to prove and to charge with. I don't even know. I guess my question is would you say if we didn't accept your proposal, for example, of amendments, what I understood you to say is that you would charge the same thing you're currently charging, correct?
Colonel?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, some troopers write the disobedience to traffic control devices just because they know there's a better chance of it sticking in court.
Okay.
So I know some troopers would continue to do that if the statute remained the same. But there are still several others who try to write under the road closure statute because it does carry a higher fine, and then they hope that it carries more weight because some jurisdictions do interpret it different.
Thank you.
Okay. Committee, any other questions for the Colonel? Okay. Okay. And Representative Lawley, your legal background is the reason. I really wanted someone with a legal background on here for these very reasons. So, and like I said, we did last session talk ad nauseum about this issue. So, okay, Colonel, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Rodriguez Williams? No? Okay. That's our habit. We always call on other legislators who are here. The old saying is, remember, don't show up at a meeting you weren't invited to. You'll be called on. So with that, no other legislators. I don't see anyone from the governor's office. Agencies. Public, anyone wish to testify on House Bill 43, winter road closures? Not seeing anyone, I will close public testimony. Committee? Moved by Conrad. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Heiner. Okay, I don't think we need to go through this bill page by page. So with that, suggested amendments, and the Colonel made one to use a different set of statutes, and I don't have those with me, and generating that on the fly would probably be difficult. I would say one of us can write, if this passes, one of us can write a committee of the whole bill on that to incorporate that, and I would look to Representative Lawley for her legal experience on those, if that happens. So any amendments here in the committee? Representative Conrad.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. There was a number of amendments that you had mentioned on at least page 2 as it related to the $1,500, and I apologize. I didn't fully understand that.
All right, I would make those when the rest of the committee is done if I have any. Are there any amendments on page 14 to address the willfully issue? I'm sorry, line 14, page 1. Hey, I've only had 4 cups of coffee yet, so give me a break.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Western.
I certainly appreciate the intent here is to tighten up and, help our troopers. I'm certainly not an attorney, didn't go to law school, and I'm not licensed to practice law, but I can certainly appreciate the concept of mens rea, and that's really important in jurisprudence. And so that's kind of my concern with striking the willfully part. At least that's my hesitation. So,
And willfully, Representative, I think gets to the proving intent, which is very difficult to do, if not impossible. Okay, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I propose an amendment to, on line 14, strike willfully fails to observe and insert obeys or disregards. Any person who obeys or who disobeys, I'm sorry, any person who disobeys or disregards any sign, marker, warning, notice, or direction.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Lawley. Discussion on the amendment. I think it's pretty clear based on all the testimony.
Question?
Question being called on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment to page 1, line 14, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. Okay, the ayes have it. Amendment's adopted. Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would make another amendment on page 2 to strike all of the underlined wording and revert back to the original statute.
Okay, seconded by Western. Okay, so we're talking about line 7 through line 13, am I correct?
Line 3
Line
through
3.
13.
Okay, strike all new language and
Strike all
revert-
changes. and
All
revert-
changes will revert to the original language. Everyone clear on that?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So Representative Heiner, would you?
Yes.
Please,
On line 3, I would put back to the way it originally read, so jurisdiction shall be subject to a fine of not more, line 4, than $750, or 2, striking and not more than $1,500, strike all of 5. Continuing on line 6, imprisonment for a period not to exceed 30 days, or 2, both, such fine and imprisonment, period, end.
okay. Representative, are you clear on what we've done? We've reverted back to the original language that is in statute. We've not changed that language.
Yeah, just a clarifying question, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Why not, is the question, why not increase that to now, to 750 to 1,500?
Representative Heiner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we've heard through testimony, many times they use a different statute to make it's easier to uphold in court, and it's not about the money. The money is not used by the department, the Wyoming Highway Department. The money doesn't really make that much of a deal to them. It's trying to protect individuals that are putting themselves and others in danger when they go around these road closures. So I don't think the money is really the factor here. It's just making the language more clear so that they can enforce the rule of law.
Okay. And just to ask the committee, have any of you ever been stopped for being on a closed road? So I have found the troopers are already understanding. Having worked in Wamsutter, lived in Rollins, the roads get closed in the winter constantly and it is possible to get on the interstate without ever seeing a road closure sign and I've just told the troopers, I was at well location such and such, I got on at this point, I didn't know they were closed, and the troopers have said, drive carefully, and where are you going? Rollins. And then generally they'll let you go home. They don't want you out there if you're just going to work. And they've been very understanding about it. And that was one of the main discussions we had in committee, was that event where people end up on a road they don't know is closed. So Western first. Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this amendment. Obviously, I have complete faith in our troopers and that they are all dedicated to their job and being really fair for everybody. To me, this is about the principle of the matter, and I think again, I'm not an attorney, but the whole concept of just prima facie, where we're assuming that it's correct unless otherwise disproven. By virtue of that sign, that pole being there, automatically guilty of this, and innocent until proven guilty is a really important concept in American jurisprudence. So that's my concept. I understand we're just dealing with something like this, and it's, in the grand scheme of things, it may not be the biggest deal, but I think the principle of it is super important to me, and that's why I'm supporting the amendment.
Representative Lawley, and we're basically discussing the amendment right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in favor of the amendment for reasons I've kind of already alluded to, and several here have. But when you have lowered the intent level, there's still a level of intent involved. It's just not a direct willful intent. So you've lowered that standard, and you add on the back end a statement of prima facie case. You have done, it's a double legal whammy, and so it is problematic. And it was one of my biggest concerns when I first read this bill, that for the same reasons you mentioned about people can get there without knowing, but if this stood, that would not matter legally. As you began, if they did decide that day to write a ticket for you, it would be very difficult because you have those two things happening at one time. And so I really strongly advise adopting this amendment.
Committee, other discussion? Question being called. We're voting on Representative Heiner's amendment on page 2, line 3 through 13, to revert to the original language and delete all new language. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, the amendment is adopted. And Mark, are you getting all of this? You okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and Representative Heiner said he would review it with you.
Thank you.
So, okay. Any other discussion on the bill?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Representative, thanks.
so I take issue with the winter road closures as a whole to begin with. We're stopping people from going home to their families is basically what it amounts to. And here in recent times, I understand the safety aspect of it, but are we gonna, for lack of a better term, baby everybody who drives on our roads? And I don't think that we need to, nor should we. And so I take issue with that. I take issue with the bill because, and we've seen, at least what I've seen and what I've seen around the state with people I've talked to is now it's just, it happens more and more frequently than it ever used to, where, well, the road just shuts down. And this isn't directly towards this bill in particular, but I guess it is, that if we can make a more focus on keeping the roads open with safety aspect of lowering the speed limit maybe or something, but giving people the opportunity to get home to their families. And I have a good quote to live by, is travel at your own risk. And if they go off the road, then you're stuck, and that's not our responsibility. But anyways, I don't support the bill for that purpose. So anyway, that's my thinking.
Okay, thank you, Representative. Representative Conrad.
Mr. Chairman, I will add, traveling the roads extensively to work and back, there is an opportunity for all of us to take advantage of, and that's called YTAPs, which I'd strongly encourage this group to review. So if there is a necessity to travel based on family and or professional or personal reasons, you can apply for that pass that allows you to go home in those instances. So I'd encourage you to reconsider, if you're in doubt with regards to this bill, to encourage the use of YTAPs, which does allow the pursuant or going past a stopped based on an approval that you receive from the highway department, and more importantly, the highway patrolman. Thank you.
Representative Tarver.
Chairman, thank you. I certainly, I feel for the safety aspect of our patrolmen, and I'm gonna have to agree with Representative Banks. There's gotta be a better way to handle this. I'm a hard no on this. I don't think more fines are gonna solve anything. I personally have went past them. Numerous of my constituents have went past them. We live out of town. We come to town, we get whatever we need, a storm moves in, they close the roads. They're shorthanded, they can't keep them clear, et cetera, et cetera. I understand all that. I'm gonna go home. this little sign or these fines aren't gonna stop me. I have other safety concerns other than that. I'll take myself responsible if I wreck. I'll figure out how to fix it. And so the I-80 concerns, that is very concerning to me. And I don't know, this isn't gonna stop these trucks. We gotta figure out a way to make them liable perhaps on the other end of it if they shut these roads down. I just don't think this legislation can do it. Thank you.
Right. Committee, any other comments? Question having been called. Roll call vote on House Bill 43, winter road closures. Mark, would you please call the roll?
Representative Banks,
No.
Representative Conrad,
Aye.
Representative Heiner,
Aye.
Representative Knapp,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Tarver,
No.
Representative Western, Chairman Burkhart.
Aye. Committee, the discussion is the same identical discussion that transportation has had for the last 3 years on this. So, you know, those of you who voted no, just know that there are other people out there who feel the same way. It's been a continuing issue. So we'll see who handles it on the floor. It's a Transportation Committee bill, and I expect that someone from Transportation will address the issue, but I really don't want another hour-long discussion of the term willfully unless Representative Lawley wants to do that.
Not particularly.
But you
Mr.
had a
Chairman,
question.
But I do have a question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure, it seems to me, and again, the Colonel, I can visit with him after, but I want the committee to walk through this with me. Is I think we, with Representative Heiner's amendments, have kind of cured the things he suggested. And I don't know if we would want to weigh into the idea of citing another statute that already exists because they already have that at their disposal. I see no reason to bring it into this bill, even by reference. And he's given me a thumbs up. So I just want to clarify that.
And Representative, that would be a personal decision to run a bill in committee of the whole or second or third reading by anyone on the committee.
Okay, we had talked about maybe doing an amendment, but I think we.
Yeah, the committee has not written an amendment, and hasn't
Okay,
taken
good.
a position on that, so.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes care of that bill. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 94, Board of Parole, Wyoming Residency. Representative Rodriguez Williams, please, come on down.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Representative Rachel Rodriguez Williams, House District 50. And today I present to you House Bill 94, titled Board of Parole, Wyoming Residency, and I ask for your favorable consideration. Mr. Chairman, if you would like me to walk you through the bill.
Hey, please, all one page of it.
Mr. Chairman, I bring to you a pretty simple bill that amends Wyoming State Statute 713-401B. It inserts the line on page 2, lines 4. This bill would require that no person shall be appointed as a member of the board who has not been a resident of the state of Wyoming for at least 1 year immediately before the person's appointment and shall be a resident throughout the member's term.
So Representative, if you would explain the reason for the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. As you might know, I sit on the Judiciary Committee, and looking at Wyoming statute in regards to the Board of Parole requirements, they're very minimal when it comes to what's required to serve or to be considered to be appointed by the governor of Wyoming compared to other states. So other states do have educational requirement, work experience requirement, residency requirements, et cetera. And so looking at our state statute, I did notice that there was no residency requirement. I don't come before you this morning citing any particular incidents, but just simply to add that requirement, which I think is quite reasonable to the state statute.
Any questions for the representative? Any questions? No. Okay, a little, just a personal privilege, a little background information on this. Our Board of Parole works long and hard, as the representative knows. You'll hear discussions about the state aircraft eventually. They are the biggest user of the state aircraft. They visit all 5 of our corrections facilities and hold the parole hearings there in person. They don't do it remotely. And that it is a tough job that we have people who volunteer to do this. That plane leaves here in Cheyenne, I believe, at 4 o'clock in the morning. So if you ever decide you want on the Board of Parole, it's not all glamour. Just some historical information for the committee. So committee, any questions for the representative? Okay, representative, hang with us. So you're the only legislator in the room, so obviously you've had your say. So with that, anybody from any state agency? I don't see anyone from the governor's office. State agency, please come on up. And identify yourself for the record. It'll turn green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Marky White, and I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Board of Parole. And we are here, of course, obviously not to oppose the bill. I've asked all 7 board members if they have any objection to this bill, and they all said, no, of course not. So I am here mainly to answer any questions the committee may have. Oh, and Mr. Chairman, may I say
Please.
one thing?
Yes.
I've only been the executive director of the board for a year, but in the last year's biennium, the one that ended June 30th, all of the money for the state aircraft was taken out. So now all Board of Parole members get up at 4 a.m. To drive.
Okay. I stand corrected. Thank you.
I just wanted to correct that for the record. But we have no objection. I have asked several of the board members, many of whom have been on the board 15 or 16 years, if they knew of anybody ever that was not a resident of the state of Wyoming to serve on the board, and no one can recall that ever. And of course, Representative Conrad was on the board for 2 or 3 years? Yes, through the chairman, I'm sorry. But unless there are any questions, we certainly do not oppose the bill.
Any questions? Ms. White, I have one. So Wyoming has always suffered a difficulty in getting people to serve on any board due to some of the controls on them, due to people who are qualified. My all-time favorite is someone had to serve on the architectural board who was from Weston County, was a licensed architect and had a specific political affiliation, which made it extremely difficult. Would this bill make it any more difficult to get people to serve on the Board of Parole, in your opinion?
Not in my opinion,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Right. Okay, thank you. Committee? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that, public testimony. Please come on down, identify yourself for the record.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Dan Fetzko, and I'm an attorney here in
Would-
Wyoming.
Turn the mic on.
Oh.
These are recorded and broadcast live. Mr. Fetzko, you're on.
All right, I'll back up again. My name is Dan Fetzko, and I'm an attorney here in the state of Wyoming. I also teach criminal justice classes over at the University of Wyoming. But I want to make it clear from the outset, I am here on my own. I'm not representing the university, so my opinions are mine and mine alone. I actually did work at the parole board for 10 years. I worked with Representative Conrad. I'll get into that in a moment, but it's very nice to see you this morning again, sir. So I was born and raised in Wyoming. Grew up in Sheridan, went to high school in Cheyenne. I even spent a year in Laramie in elementary school when my mom was going back to get her bachelor's. I went to undergrad there, took a little break and went down to Colorado to law school at DU. But right after that, I moved back to Rawlins. I was a public defender in Rawlins for a little bit. So I got to represent clients who were in the prison committing felony crimes or out in the community. So I got a taste of the Wyoming correctional system pretty early in my career. I then transitioned to the county attorney's office where I prosecuted felonies, misdemeanors, you name it, for a couple of years there in Carbon County. And I moved to the Attorney General's office where for 5 years I did appellate prosecution primarily, but I also did special prosecutions around the state. And most importantly to this discussion, I was the attorney for the Department of Corrections going back to like 2004, and I represent the parole board. So I left there, the Attorney General's office. I was fascinated by correctional law. Not many people are, but I found it very interesting, like inmate civil rights, like the history of corrections, how it's evolved in the United States. So I was intrigued by the parole board job, and I predate all the parole board members that are currently there. There's only one staff person there who's been there longer than me. And I can tell you, there was a parole board member who tried to move out of state back when we had the jet. The jet was fun, I'll tell you. It was in the mid 2000s, and we had $1 billion surplus every year. Imagine that, right? It was the golden age. And so we flew around the country. And we had a parole board member who moved to California. He retired from federal law enforcement and he moved to California, and he would fly back to Jackson to like his condo or his timeshare, and the plane would come and get him there, and then we would go to the hearings. But the other members, you know, they got a little fed up with that, and they basically forced him to resign. But yes, there have been members who have lived out of state. I will tell you that. So anyway, I left the Attorney General's office in 2007. And I worked at the parole board from 2007 to 2017. I was either the deputy director or the executive director. That's when I worked with Mr. Conrad. And I'll tell you, I loved it. I cherish my time at the parole board. I tell people that that's really where I got my true education in the criminal justice system. I mean, I'd been a prosecutor, I'd been a public defender, I'd been at the Attorney General's office, but when I got to go into those prisons and listen to the inmates, I heard every inmate in the state basically, unless they had the death penalty. So yeah, it was an education for sure. So I have a lot of institutional knowledge about the parole board that I can share with you today. And again, I loved my time working there. I still have some great relationships with parole board members. In fact, one of them is like a father figure to me. In fact, my dad and him got together before my dad passed on and like drank beer and watched John Wayne movies. You know, it was, I mean, great guys. I'm still very close with him. So I'm not here to disparage the institution of parole. I still think we have a great parole board the way it's set up, because we have an indeterminate sentencing system where we can target our lower level offenders and get them out earlier than perhaps states that have mandatory minimums and they don't have parole boards. But in any event, I got very active in parole. I actually published a couple law review articles about parole. And eventually I moved on to teach at the university. But sometime around 2014 or 2015, you know, I got involved in a couple of those collaborative justice reinvestment type projects. You know, one, I believe, through the National Governors Association. I think the Council of State Governments was in there one time. And one of the recommendations that they targeted was the parole revocation statutes. They said, hey, you're too punitive. When you revoke people on parole, they're spending way too much time in prison, particularly lower level offenders. And, you know, from my firsthand knowledge, I tended to agree. I thought quite often our parole board was a little bit punitive in their revocation practices. So when I left the parole board and went to the university, I published a law review article in February 2022. It's available out there. It's called No Credit for Time Served. It was in the University of Wyoming Law Review. And it deals with the parole revocation process. And I also touched upon parole board member qualifications in my article. Now, when I was the parole board director, and my predecessor before me, Pat Anderson, we were very, very thorough in our annual reports. We'd have all kinds of performance measures, primarily parole grant rates. How many people are being paroled versus how many people are being denied? How many people are getting their parole revoked? How many people are recidivating? We used to track all that and put it in our annual reports. Well, in 2019, as a result, I think of another, it was maybe the Governor's Association again, this legislative body did tweak the parole statute on revocation ever so slightly. So I wanted to study that. Like I said, I have a fondness for the parole board. It's like an alma mater, like my old high school or something. I want to see it do well. I enjoyed my time there. So I go to look at the annual report. They don't publish any annual reports anymore. At least they don't put them on their website. If you go to the parole board website right now, they have one annual report from 2021, and you can't even access it. If you try to click on it, access is denied. However, you can contrast that with like the Wyoming Department of Corrections website. They got their last 15 years worth of annual reports. They got all kinds of data contained in there. And for another comparison, I looked at the Pennsylvania Parole Board. And they have their data going back 30 years, and they update it monthly. So here I am now, a criminologist trying to do criminology research, and I know the parole board pretty well. I want to see, hey, do these legislative changes work? I can't even get the data from them. I had to make a public records request where the documents they gave me, most of them that were public, were so heavily redacted, I had to return most of them.
Mr. Fedzko,
Yeah.
we need to stay on target on this bill, which is parole board
Okay,
qualification,
I
please.
apologize, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a couple things public. So during my time at the parole board, I was a little dismayed and frustrated at how politicized the appointments are. You mentioned that it is hard to get members to apply. Well, I firsthand knew that there were plenty of people in the community who were PhDs who would apply, and they would not even get an interview. And very often we would have people appointed who I'd ask them, well, why did you apply for the parole board? And they would tell me, well, this was my last choice. I wanted this board or this board, but this is what I got. And I'm just telling you the truth. This is how the process has worked. So that's why I wrote my article partially. I wanted to highlight the fact we have no qualifications to serve on the parole board. Whereas other states, I get that might be difficult, in your opinion, to fill some of these spots. But from sitting there taking the phone calls from people who would apply, I can tell you there are qualified people. In states around us that are similar size to us, like South Dakota, for instance, they have qualifications that at least 3 members be attorneys. Like in Montana, they have a list of qualifications. But here we have none. And I can tell you it was an issue at times. So I wrote the law review article. In addition to qualifications, one thing I pointed out was the lack of transparency. So I don't want to belabor the point, but there's no data available to even study what's going on with the parole board right now, let alone the complete lack of qualifications to serve on the parole board. So, I have a whole laundry list of recommendations I can make for you. I'll just say I support the bill, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Fedzko. Any questions? Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, obviously you're very passionate about it and you know a lot, but you just said you support the bill, but can you just dig into a little bit why? How does this solve some of those problems that you were just mentioning?
Chairman Burkhart, Representative Western, it really doesn't. I think it's just a baby step, maybe to get the topic out there. It's not my bill, but I'm here to talk about it as a concerned taxpayer. So I'm going to voice my opinion that while I think this is a good step, that there's much more that needs to be done to fix what's going on with the parole board.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Conrad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fedzko, it's great to see you again. I do want to share with you that my time on the parole board was an incredibly enlightening, educational, and probably one of the largest pieces of service that I've given to this state. I will share with you it was not my last choice. I will also share with you that I actually wanted to serve because 90% of those people who are paroled will be our neighbors. And I wanted to say in how those neighbors looked and give them that chance they needed to be successful in life. Regarding qualifications, I disagree with you respectfully that there are a number of qualifications that are vetted through our governor and other agencies. So with that being said, I do want to share with you that our recidivism rate, I think, is a demonstrable metric on how well we did as a parole board. As you well know, our recidivism rate was one of the best in the countries. So with that being said, we always strived and continue to strive through education, through various parole boards and continuing education due to seminars, et cetera, with the Department of Justice and Department of Corrections. Fact-based decision-making, which again promotes, I think, the solid nature of the Wyoming Board of Parole, which I had the pleasure of serving on for a number of years as the vice chairman with Chairman Gray. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. And I'll remind the committee that we need to be cautious of statements and that with the witness. We don't debate witnesses. Any other questions? Mr. Fetzko, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So, committee? Moved by Lawley?
Second.
Seconded by Conrad. Committee, any discussion? Question being called. Roll call vote on House Bill 94, Board of Parole, Wyoming Residency. Mark, if you would please call the roll.
Representative Banks,
Aye.
Representative Conrad,
Aye.
Representative Heiner,
Aye.
Representative Knapp,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Tarver,
Aye.
Representative Western, Chairman Burkhart.
Aye.
Vote is 9 ayes, 0 noes.
Okay, thank you, Mark. The bill passes. The Minerals Committee and Representative, I will assume you will handle your own bill on the floor. Or do you want one of the committee members to do it? I don't think so. Okay, Representative, thank you. So committee, one last thing. Representative Lawley has brought it to my attention when we amended House Bill 43, the road closures. We also need to amend the preamble to that bill. And I will look at that as a conforming amendment to be handled in there. Because we removed the new fines, that portion will come out. If that is acceptable to the committee, if not, I will reopen the bill and we will discuss it. Committee? Any opposition to that, letting it be a conforming amendment? Okay, Mark, do you understand what I just did?
No.
Okay. Okay, Mark, in the notes on the amendments, just add in there that the preamble to House Bill 43 needs to be corrected to reflect the amendments. And staff will know what to do with that. Okay, is everyone clear on what I just did? I just want to make sure. I need to make really sure with staff because Mark has to relay all of this to our attorneys who will then correct it. And Mark, if they have any questions or anything, they can just come and see me directly.
Okay, and I'll talk with Representative Heiner.
Yes, he will
Just
give you
clarify my
his
wording.
amendment on that.
And also, I'll talk with him about that. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, you two have it, good. So, committee, with that, you've got to see some of the other things we do, especially for the new members. Normally, you would not see these kind of bills on, in this committee, but because other committees have a heavier workload, we get some of them. And this is just an example of some of the things we look at. I think you've seen a variety this morning. Military Affairs Bill, Parole Board Bill, Highway Bill. So it gives you a broad scope of some of the things we have to deal with. And when I was asked if the committee would accept these bills, the answer was yes. I know the committee can handle them. Good questions, good questioning. So thank you. Turn